Doesn't our Congress have blame in this global south of America? No one points a finger at who mandates it. Does the government have a lot of the blame? Absolutely. You do know that you're talking to George Gammon, don't you? Randy, that might be the most obvious question anyone has ever asked on one of these live streams. I'm not giving you, I'm not, no disrespect. I'm just giving you a hard time here, buddy. It's a good question, and you're pointing out what more Americans should know, and that is that the government deserves the majority of the blame for pretty much every problem that we have in the United States right now. It reminds me of Thomas Sowell's saying that I repeat so often, that today's problems are a result of yesterday's solutions. Talking about the government there, being the arsonist and the firefighter. I mean, this is, if you think about all the problems that we have in the United States today, and then just try to go through a thought experiment of looking at those problems through the lens of government being the same size as a portion of GDP as it was prior to the Fed. So prior to the Fed, government spending was less than 10% of GDP. Now, I mean, it's gone down a little bit, but during the cerveza sickness, it was up over 50% when you include state and local, federal. So think about that. Think about how much bigger a role government plays in the economy. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out the higher that percentage is, the worse it's going to be for economic output. Just take it to an extreme, take it to 100%. Well, if the government was 100% of GDP, how awesome and dynamic do you think our economy would be? Obviously, it'd be terrible. We see what that's like. We saw communist China. We saw communist Russia. So think about how much better it would be if the government was less than 10%. But look at all the crazy politicians we have. Do you think that we would attract so many sociopaths if the government didn't have much power? Think about lobbyists. You know, everyone talks about how that's a big problem. Well, would it be that big of a problem if government didn't have any power? Why would the lobbyist be trying to lobby? They wouldn't, right? You talk about all the corporations having way too much power, and big pharma and big the warmonger, what do they call it, the military industrial state and whatnot. I mean, would these things, I'm sure there would be problems. There's always we live in an imperfect world with imperfect human beings, but I think these problems would be dramatically lower if we had very small government. Because again, think about the corporations. Would they be trying to influence the politicians if the politicians didn't have any power? This is one thing. I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here, but I really like Russell Brand, and I watched some of his videos because he's very he's not just good at kind of obviously he's an entertaining guy and he's got some interesting ideas, but he's great at YouTube. Really good at YouTube. So I'll occasionally check out a video or two of his, maybe once every couple weeks or so. And this is what he just doesn't see, is he talks about, the problem with big government and the problem with big corporations, but he doesn't connect the two. And I always, feel like just asking him, because he always talks about the problems with big corporations and big government. I'm like, well, Russell, what would your solution be for big corporations? How are you going to solve that problem? Bigger government. Okay, well, then you're making the problem worse. Right? So what you got to do is you got to shrink government. And if you shrink government, then that shrinks the problem with the big corporations. And so, yeah, this is something I try to preach all the time. And hopefully, collectively, as a group of rebel capitalists, we can wake up and open the eyes of more Americans out there so they can see that the solution isn't to elect better politicians. That's not going to get you anywhere, because even if you elect some decent people, if government power is the same size or continues to grow, then eventually you're going to get the sociopaths back in there, the megalomaniacs, the people that have an insatiable lust for power. So the true long-term solution is to shrink the size of government. Period. End of story.